I was kind of anti-Bitcoin for a while because of the whole fact that it didn't generate any cash flows, didn't pay any dividends. Why would you own something like that?
The classic value investing lens is like, well, I can't calculate the value.
And that's where I came from, right? So I had that. The penny dropped when you realize that that is a feature, not a bug, right? Because the fact is that if it's more like a commodity, and I think you can only really compare it to gold, then it is going to keep going up simply because of the debasement of the currency, right? And it's a scarce asset. As long as they're printing money, it will go up in value, just like the housing market in Australia, right? It's exactly the same thing. Everyone thinks that they're a smart investor because they bought a house in Australia 10 years ago and it's worth triple.
Drives me mad.
It's got nothing to do with your skill as an investor, right? It's got to do with the leverage in the system and the fact that they're printing money, right? That's all it is. So when you start to realize these things about Bitcoin and the penny dropping, look, no one can, the Satoshi thing that has disappeared is the best thing as well, because it does give it the immaculate conception that it needed, right? I think it would be a much more flawed asset if everyone knew who created it. So I think that is definitely one of its strongest things as well, because, you could argue that, let's just say, if Harvey Weinstein was the creator of Bitcoin, probably would crash to 99%. But that's not the case. And to be honest, I don't, I think that the person who's created Bitcoin, I don't think they're around anymore. I think that's probably what's actually happened. And I don't think that anyone's ever going to find out whoever did it. So again, feature, not a bug, right? The fact that, like what you said, we can't have any kind of scandals. We can't have any of this stuff. This is all, that all gives me more confidence that this will continue on its growth, at least for the next 10 to 20 years. I don't think it will last forever. People talk about the Bitcoin standard. If the world goes to a Bitcoin standard, the price, the price is irrelevant, right? Because if we stop using dollars because they become worthless and everyone's using Bitcoin, then we can't price it in dollars either. So the Bitcoin standard, everything ends then. This whole party right now, and don't get me wrong, if we're on the Bitcoin standard, it's going to be great for civilization. But we might not be trading it in the ways that we're trading it now. We might not be doing things that we're doing now. We're in a kind of like a crossroads here, right? There's a tremendous amount of opportunity with an asset that is incredibly unique. And we're still, you could argue that we're not in its infancy. We're probably not even we're probably getting out of its middle age, really. Which is kind of...
that in itself is a big question. Do you think that? What would lend that as a...
The diminishing returns, right? So all we have to look at is the rate of return. So this cycle will return around 12x from bottom to top. Let's just say the cycles we're seeing continue. The next cycle will only do 6. The cycle after that will only do 3. Tell me what that is. That's something that's growing old. That's something that's if you go back to 20 years ago, like this thing was doing 100 or 50 or whatever. Now we're down to 12, we're down to 6, we're down to 3. That's going to then drop to 1.5. So again, it's just a contrarian look. Of course, it's still young. And especially if it's going to be around forever, it's only been 15 years, but it's already had its explosive growth. Like, it's already an adult. It's going to live forever, but it's already an adult, if that makes sense. So it's past its baby stage. It's walking. It's past its teenage stage. It's probably into its 30s and 40s right now. It's just going to live forever, right? So it's already quite a mature asset.
I think my pushback to that is, like, if I think about 100 people and I chatted to them on the street, you actually might find that, 90% of them they've heard of Bitcoin. But if you said to them, how much of your net wealth have you got in self-custody? They'd look at you like you're a complete alien. And so I think the percentage of meaningful adoption is quite small.
Yes.
And given that this is the first cycle in which we've got active nation state participation from a regulatory perspective, and they're about to start stacking the balance sheet, right? The strategic Bitcoin reserve, all this kind of stuff that's happening. If this market top, whenever it might be set, my initial timeline was for about August of this year. Who knows what might happen? If it does do a higher high, higher than the range that diminishing returns suggests from the previous cycles, then that particular trend you're describing is broken. And that's where that whole phrase of like all your models are broken. And that's not to say that you're wrong. I don't know. I definitely buy into this concept that as this preferred form of money takes hold across its three key functions of store of value, medium of exchange, unit of account, by definition, it will be less volatile and there won't be the same kind of price action. But I don't know when that is.
Yeah.
So it's a good one. Final point being the concept of a Veblen good is key in that the easiest example being is, when you're batting in the like elite watch realm or some kind of car or other luxury good, people pay more for it because it's more expensive.
Yes.
And so Bitcoin is the first product that's a commodity that when the price goes up, you don't just mine more gold or dig for more coal or pump more oil. You can't, because there's a fixed supply schedule. And so that price inelasticity on the downside, that's fucking an unknown that I don't think has been properly stress tested yet. And we could see outrageous kind of fiat pricing of a Bitcoin.
Yeah, and to come back to that, you're absolutely right. But the thing is, the model is broken. The model doesn't break to the upside, right? The upside can be narrative driven, and the real breaking of the model would be the support, right?
That 38K power law. Yes. Okay. Interesting.
It would have to be a sustained break of that. COVID whipped through, right, for a very brief moment and then kind of snap back up. So to break the power law model, we would actually have to have a sustained trend underneath the support. That would break that whole idea that it's following a power law trend. The bubbles are they're oscillations from these trends, and the oscillations are driven by narrative. They're driven by the money printers. They're driven by
human psychology.
They're driven by Elon Musk's Twitter, right? Yeah. So they don't matter so much. So yeah, I agree with you on that, but yeah, it's like it's flipping it the other way around.
Interesting. And hence your whole process has been about like what's the worst case scenario and how do we cater for that and therefore build something that's robust over the long term, which is, I think, it's a much, much more interesting engineering problem to have solved. This concept of diminishing returns, just to kind of really make sure we've hammered it out properly. So the point is that as a technology hits a marketplace, as a money is adopted, the idea that like the cost to purchase that coin is reducing over time in terms of the value growth.
The value growth.
And what I am intrigued by is like it's such an interesting thing where Bitcoin's just this complete opposite of the status quo, right? Where you've got 8 blokes, 70 to 80 years old, that get together every 6 weeks and go, yeah, I think the interest rate, i.e. the cost of money, should be, 4% or whatever they say. In some ways, Bitcoin is a fairer reflection on the irrationality of humans. And the volatility that you guys are able to capture value from is going nowhere. So do you think there might be a scenario in which, yes, the diminishing returns plays out over time as more capital is drawn into Bitcoin, but do you think that there's still going to be, humans are emotional, right? There'll still be a Bitcoin price to trade, surely?
Absolutely. There's always going to be a Bitcoin price to trade, mostly because, this is a highly liquid asset that trades 24/7. In other words, it is the best thing to trade, right? This is another thing when, I guess it seems counterintuitive, but it's not really a scarce asset in the sense of what scarce is, right? To me, scarce is like, there's a diamond on the top of the mountain, right? And there's 10 people running up to get it. And the one person's going to get it. Therefore, the other 9 people don't. At the end of the day, Bitcoin can be bought and sold on any given day of the week, at any time of the day, on any exchange throughout the world. It's not a scarce asset, right? But it is an asset that has a capped supply that cannot be tampered with. These are different ideas. So the supply shock narrative, I don't really agree with, because I don't think there can be a supply shock in a market that's so liquid. The other thing is that the price is discovered in the futures and derivatives market, right? if we only had a spot market to trade, we wouldn't see the prices and we wouldn't see the bubbles that we get, right? The fact that people are trading derivatives and futures with leverage creates the volatility that you're referring to. That's what gives us the opportunity to capture value from, right? That's how I look at it, at least.